starting this. Um, so like I said, since we don't have a lot of time left in the semester, I'm just combining these two because, they're very similar. So we'll just talk about them together. So the concept of sampling. Now, sampling has a lot of different, definitions over, various disciplines. If you're talking about like research and stuff, that means a whole separate thing. But the two main ones, the two main definitions that I think most people consider with like sound are repurposing music that already exists for a different purpose or in different mediums or different media, sorry, or recording an existing sound and using that for a different purpose. So probably the most famous, the most sampled piece of music of all time is the Amen drum break from the song Amen Brother by the Winstons, which I'm just going to play a little excerpt of that. So this is essentially the song. But the part of the song that everybody has heard and the most sampled piece of music of all time would be this drum break that the drummer did in this later part of the song. How's this sound quality for you guys? Can you hear it all right?
Yeah.
Okay. You guys have probably heard that drum break, in many different types of music. It's been sampled over and over in hip hop, electronic music, and rock music. It's been used a lot. So essentially taking something that already exists, a sample of an existing piece of music, and reusing it either in other forms of music or in the purpose of sound design, your own different sounds. And you can manipulate those samples however you want. But the main thing that I want to talk about today is, using different sound files or recording your own sound files and essentially making those your samples, your assets for when you're making your own projects. So the main thing that you would probably do in terms of this is field recording. So you'd go out with a microphone, or you would bring something into a studio. You don't have to necessarily go out with an expensive Zoom microphone like this, but essentially just taking a sound source that, either exists already out in nature. It doesn't have to be like this nature either. It can be like, in an urban setting too, if it needs to be. But, taking a field recorder, going up and recording something and saying, I'm going to use this as a texture, or I'm going to use this as the basis of what I want my sound effect to be. So going out and getting the sounds that you want, sampling, an actual sound source, or recording a sound source and using it for a different purpose. So one of the things that we can sample that is man-made is different types of noise. Now, I have a rainbow here because we're going to be talking about different colors, and everyone's probably most familiar with white noise. White noise is essentially all of the frequencies around the entire, spectrum of, different frequencies, from low frequencies to high frequencies. All of the frequencies are represented equally. So it's all frequencies, equal distribution of the frequencies at the same amplitude. And it's random. So the audio file is like very random. So it creates this sort of pattern, which has a bunch of like random, spikes into it, but it's very consistent across the entire frequency spectrum. But the thing about white noise is, since it's so flat, you guys probably remember learning about the Fletcher-Munson curve. We typically are a lot more sensitive to these like mid frequencies and the higher frequencies. So whenever we listen to white noise, those are the frequencies that typically stick out to us, even though every frequency is equally represented. And I'm just going to, you guys have heard white noise before, but I'm going to make you listen to white noise right now. So here it is. And I've tested it, so it shouldn't be too loud. If it is too loud, let me know. So white noise, essentially. So all of the frequencies are equally represented, low, high, but it sounds more high pitched. Like you typically hear the higher pitch frequencies more because we're a lot more sensitive to those frequencies. Fun fact, there's a bunch of different types of noise in terms of color. So let's talk about pink noise. Pink noise, again, is representing all the different frequencies across the entire frequency spectrum. But you'll notice with this, all of the frequencies are going, the higher frequencies are going down in pitch over time. Specifically, it's decreasing by 3 decibels per octave as it's going down. So there's a lot less of the higher frequencies, but a lot more of the lower frequencies. It's still random in terms, typically, tends more towards these lower frequencies and less to the higher frequencies. Has more of a mellow tone to it. Like instead of the white noise sound, which is very like in your face with those high pitched frequencies, these high pitched frequencies are brought down a little bit, and it just sounds a little bit more chill. And I'll play an example of that. So this is pink noise. Hope you guys are just me enjoying. I hope you guys are enjoying me just playing noise for you. But you'll notice that that's not as intense. It still has a little bit of energy into it. Like we'll still be a lot more sensitive to like what's here, but you hear more of the lower frequencies and not as much of the higher frequencies. All the frequencies are still here, but the lower frequencies are turned up a little bit more, and the higher frequencies are turned down. That's why you get this curve here. But if we want to go a little bit more intense, we can go with brown noise or red noise. It's technically called Brownian noise. And this is where you get an even more intense curve. Again, every frequency is represented. You might see that over here, it kind of gets a little bit cut off, but you'll notice that it says like this is minus 80 decibels. So it'll keep going down till infinity, but this is decreasing by 6 decibels per octave. So it's a lot more of intense of a slope. So these higher frequencies are very, very low, and the lower frequencies you can hear a lot more. This typically gets compared to with like background noise. So like if you turn on your microphone to start, recording, your house, you're going to get a lot more of the lower frequencies and maybe a little bit of high frequencies, but it's going to sound kind of, like background ambient noise. A lot of people use, pink noise or red noise or even white noise as a sort of therapy kind of thing. Like they'll use it to go to bed as like having just noise in the background. But typically brown or red noise is used a little bit more because it even has more of that mellow tone to it than the pink noise does. And, it gets compared to a lot with like waves crashing in the distance or like cars going by in the distance. It's just kind of like, just sounds like background noise. So this is what brown or red noise sounds like. So mostly just very, very chill. Not as many high frequencies, but it's a lot more of the lower and the mid frequencies here. There's a lot more of a chill sound. Now, let's go the other way. We have blue noise, which you can think of this as like the opposite of pink noise, since it's still going by 3 dB per octave, but it's going up. So with this, you'll notice that, your lower frequencies are less represented and your higher frequencies are more represented. So this, again, it's the opposite of pink noise, and it kind of is going to sound a little bit more like what white noise sounds like, how we perceive white noise, even though white noise is pretty much just flat across the entire part. So this is essentially blue noise. Sounds more like TV static a little bit, with like not as much low end to it, because there's a lot more of those higher frequencies in there. And again, if we go more intense, we have purple noise, or violet noise, whichever you want to call it. Again, every frequency represented, even though it kind of breaks off the chart here, it goes all the way down to infinity. So this is just only part of what you'll see with it. But you can think of this as the opposite of brown and red noise because it goes up by 6 decibels per octave. And this, again, very much the high frequencies are going to be represented here, and you'll hear those a lot, even more than with the blue noise. So that's going to sound like this. So it just sounds like essentially a high-passed white noise kind of thing, which essentially is kind of what it is. So yeah, but there's one more color of noise I want to go over, and that's gray noise. Now, gray noise can essentially be thought of as white noise as we perceive it as human beings. Because as white noise would just be flat. But you'll notice this looks like an inverted Fletcher-Munson curve. So you know that right here are going to be the frequencies that we are most sensitive to, and here are not the frequencies we are most sensitive to. It's that inverted weighted A curve. So when listening to this, it's going to sound like every single frequency is represented equally, even though it's not, just because our human ears are biased to this range of frequencies. So that is going to sound like this. This is what, if we played it, this is how the human ear would perceive white noise as it actually is. All of the different frequencies are equally represented there. So the reason I'm bringing up noise is because noise can be sampled. You can have, either an audio file of these different forms of noise, depending on what you're wanting to go for. If you're wanting just a very flat kind of thing, or if you're wanting more of this background noise or the lower ends, or if you're just wanting this high end hiss to give it a little bit, to give something a little bit more sparkle, you can use any of these types of noise. And a lot of different synths have, generators that will generate these noises that you can just have, and layering that in to your sound, because adding noise to your sound is going to add a lot more texture to it. It's going to add a lot more. It's going to, fill it out a lot more than if they were just nothing, than they were just the samples that you're using. So it fills out this frequency spectrum for frequencies that are not represented. So it can give you a fuller sound. And you can use whichever one that you feel would be necessary for what you're wanting. And even you can just start off with white noise and then just EQ in or out certain frequencies that you want. So these are just different types. These are just different tools that you can use if you were wanting to, make your sound a little bit more full. Last thing I'll talk about with the slideshow, and then we'll get into different demos. I have a couple different demos that I'm going to show you guys. We have the main 4 ways in which you can manipulate a sample. You can manipulate its volume, and by volume, it's essentially, I'm mostly talking about automating its volume over time, either having it fade in, fade out, or have like the middle part of it fade, essentially changing the volume. You can do pitch, and in pitch, you have a lot of different options in terms of pitching something up, pitching something down, or changing pitch over time. So that's another option that you have with that. You can manipulate the time of the sample, and this can be in the form of either elongating the sample, making it longer, so time stretching it out, or squashing it, making it a lot smaller, making it a lot quicker. But you can also manipulate time in terms of, what if you reversed the sample? What if you played it backwards? What kind of results will you get when you're doing something like that? And then, of course, adding different effects to the sample. And I'll show off different effects that you can use for different things. So let's get on to the demos. So I'm going to start, let me pull up what I need here. I don't need this anymore. So the first thing that I'm going to show is essentially, I have I have this audio file right here. So, trying to manipulate freaking Zoom stuff. All right, here we go. We have this audio file right here. This audio file by itself sounds like this. This is just a random sample that I found that I thought we can mess around with. So it kind of sounds like maybe like hitting a dumpster. It's very metallic, but it's an impact kind of sound. Is the volume good for that? Do I need to turn it up or turn it down, or is it good where it's at?
Maybe up a little bit.
Okay. Turn it up a little bit. All right. Does that sound better? I don't want it to like blast you guys. So this is the sound we're working with. Very metallic kind of sound. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go in order of how I describe things. We're going to change volume over time. So one of the ways that we can do that is we can fade it in to get rid of that transient at the very front of it, to make it less of an impact sound. So it kind of sounds like maybe like an echo of what it originally was, but it doesn't have that hard impact sound. And I can go really like intense with this, make it sound kind of just like a texture to get rid of that impact sound at the front of it. I can go less intense with that too. Maybe have a little bit of it, but not so harsh. You know, or just like very subtly, or I can just go intense with it. But I can also come at it from this side if I want to like manipulate, maybe make it a lot shorter of a tail. So it's just very short transient attack. So you can really just manipulate it however you want in terms of volume. And you can also, like, if you wanted to, you can have it change volume where it like dips in the middle and gets louder. So let me show a quick example of that. So let's say it goes down in volume and then, you know, comes back up really quickly. You can maybe hear that extra tail. I'm going to bring it back so that we can maybe hear more of that effect. And, you know, am I saying that this is a practical use for this exact sample? No, but I'm just showing that there's different things that you can do with, you know, you can have a lot of effect with volume in and of itself. So, ignore my dog in the background. So those are things that you can do to a sample with volume. The next thing was pitch. So I have this little thing over here that'll transpose the pitch in semitones. So let's take this sound. Oh, the automation is still active. Turn off that automation. I don't want it. Get rid of it. Get it out of here. No, get out of here. Just be normal. It's not perfect, but you know, it'll do. You get the idea. So what we can do here is let's take this sample and let's pitch it down in octave because it's already kind of heavy. So let's make it a little bit more heavy by pitching it down an octave. It's a lot more of that low end impact to it. So it's very kind of starting to get into like the sub frequencies, but it has a lot more of that low end to it rather than like the low mids. Still has an upper impact sound, but still it has like a lower, like deeper hit. Let's do 2 octaves down. And you don't have to go this intense with it either. I'm just showing like examples. Now it's just pretty much just really low. Let's just go all the way with 4 octaves. Just kind of, you mainly only really hear that main impact sound, like the higher end frequencies that were in that main impact sound. Okay. That's going to be a thing I have to deal with every now and then. Okay. So So that's that lower end thing. What happens if we pitch it up? So this is the original. Let's pitch it up an octave, or about an octave. Now that has a really interesting sound to it. It kind of sounds a little bit not like it. None of these sound natural, but kind of has this weird texture to it. Let's try 2 octaves, see what that sounds like. Kind of sounds like sci-fi-esque. Like kind of has like this weird like science fiction kind of sound to it. Let's go all the way with 4 octaves up. That just sounds like a computer freaking out, which I mean, I guess it is because it's just pitching this up 4 octaves, but it's just going crazy. So that's like just manipulating pitch, and you can manipulate pitch over time too. So if I wanted to like just, if I can try to figure out a way to do this, try to maybe like just do a weird LFO with my finger. You know, do weird like pitch changing effects. Actually, I actually have maybe an effect down here. Yeah, frequency shifter. So something we can do is we can change like how fast it's oscillating by how much, and to how much frequency is in between the oscillations, and you can get these weird frequency and pitch changes. If I can. So that we'll get to effects later, but that's essentially some things that you can do with pitch to the original sound. Now, the next thing we can do is we can change time. So let's say that we want to change time without changing, you know, the pitch. Well, what we can do is we can make it longer. Well, that changed the pitch. How do I not change the pitch? I don't remember how to not change the pitch. Anyway, we'll get to that. But again, if you make a sample longer, then the pitch is going to go down. Oh. So you can just get different effects by stretching out the effect or squishing it. Like these just sound like different types of percussion instruments now. Like it sounds more like a smaller pit instrument now, rather than this very deep, hollow hit. Or you can make it, you know, a thicker hit. So, but what was the other thing that we can do with time? We can reverse it. So let's see what it sounds like when it's reversed. So this nice little swell up. It's kind of interesting. Of course, you can combine any of these effects if you want to. Oh, my computer is yelling at me right now. So this is something that you can do as well. Now let's get into actual effects here. So I have a few different effects here. So this first one I think is pretty much just like just running it through some distortion. So here's the original, and here's with distortion. There's a little bit of extra effects on here too, but it's really interesting what like the different things that you can do with it. Or wait, this wasn't the, that was something else. I don't remember what that was supposed to be. This is the distortion. Getting more like some interesting distortion on it. So we can add different, you know, distortions on here to get different sounds in it. So this is just adding effects to the sound itself. Next, we have a flanger. We can do some interesting things with that. So get some weird different flange effects. Get another one here. And these are just like different like little things that you can do. And these are just presets that you can get. Maybe. So yeah, we talked about the frequency shifter. So let's go to like a multiband compressor. So here's like something you can do with a multiband compressor. Or maybe you want to do something like this. That didn't really do anything. Let's try this. That gives a completely different sound to it too. Or maybe, so all these different effects can do different things. Here's another like distortion here. And then you have, of course, reverb. You can add, whatever reverb you want. And I think that's all the random effects. So essentially you can just kind of mess around with different effects to get this sort of sound that you want. And you can also go crazy with these effects too. So if I went down to the reverb and tried to find like a very like crazy reverb here, I don't know, maybe something like this. You get a completely different sound with that than you would with a different reverb. So those are essentially just different effects that I wanted to show off that you can do. So the next demo that I'm going to show is we're going to take a video and we're just going to one by one add different sound effects to it and see, what happens when we add those sound effects. So the video in question is this. So here it is. Let me go back to the beginning. So it's a guy with a sword, opens up the sword, unsheaths it, and there's this aura around him. Can you guys see the video all right? Just making sure. Okay. So the first thing that you can probably think to add is, the sword sound itself. So let me, where did I even put, hello? Okay. So before I even got like into the sword sound, I just have like just background noise things going on here. So those are just the ambience for the room, and maybe like since he's moving the sword rattles around a little bit. So just a little bit of random background ambience. So next, I have the sword sound itself, like the sword being unsheathed or like being like quickly pulled out and then unsheathed fully. So I have these two effects here, or these two sounds here. So this first sound is just the sword being pulled out really quickly. And so this is just the sound. This is the sound of, I'm pretty sure, of just silverware, like of a knife being sharpened. So that's just this sound right here. So that's the sound being pulled out quickly. It doesn't sound great on its own. So some things that we can do are adding this distortion to it and a little bit of EQ to get those frequencies that we want. So it has a little bit more energy to it. Now, the next part here is, this is the original audio file for this next part. It's right here. So I just found a sound file of somebody unsheathing a sword really slowly, but it wasn't long enough. So what I ended up doing is I took the sound file from like here on, copied it, and then placed it here, but reversed it so that it keeps that kind of, makes it a little bit longer, but doesn't make it sound like it's, it's repeating. It still sounds natural with it. So that sounds like this. So just to make the sound a little bit longer. And I put like an effect on there to reduce the ambience in the original recording. So far, it just sounds like this. Which on its own, sounds cool enough. It's a sword being unsheathed. But let's add a little bit more, interest to it. So when I was messing around with my samples, I found this little sample right here that I thought, had this really kind of spooky quality to it, this kind of unearthly quality to it. So this is what this sounds like. And that's just something I found from the sound libraries that I've had. So just to kind of give it this unnatural, supernatural quality to it. So altogether, it sounds like this so far. Just a little bit of an effect to add to it. Now, next, I've got these sections up here. This is a bunch of files that I've got going on right here. So this here is sound of flames from like a blowtorch. So this is what this sounds like on its own. Why am I not getting sound from that? Fun fact of the day, I don't know what I'm doing. Huh, interesting. Why am I not getting sound from that? I don't know. Don't know why I'm not getting sound from that. Am I getting sound from... Not getting sound from anything in this group. Interesting. Did not plan for this. What's happening here? Okay, some of these sounds are working. Some of them are not. So I don't know what's going on with that. Or maybe it's just really quiet and I can't hear it. Oh, that's what it is. It's just really quiet. So this is just the sound of fire right here. Because I felt like there was stuff going on right there, so I added a little bit of what sounded like flames. I'll turn it up so it can be heard. And I just added this little auto pan and this vintage delay EQ to add a little bit of effect. And I turned it down really far in the mix because it's just more of a texture rather than like a main sound that's going on with it. Next, I've got our friend white noise here coming from a synthesizer. So that's just adding in with the flame sounds. Oh, who else is wanting in? Oh. So everybody else, so this is just adding, texture to the flames, essentially. Just white noise. Or is it pink noise? I don't remember. It's a noise of some kind. Next here, we got this kind of like machine rattle noise. I added some effects too. Kind of make it haunting and ominous. Next, I have just like this little atmosphere sound here. Added a little bit of effect too. So that sounds like this. It's a little bit of twinkle, essentially. And then I added, so I wanted to add a little bit something to represent the aura that's happening here, like around him. So I added a couple different things. I mainly added this sound right here. It's kind of choir-esque synth sound. So let me make sure I got all my effects on because I was trying to show them one at a time, but I forgot. Oh, and I forgot about this right here. So whenever he opens up the sword for the first time, I was like, I didn't feel that, this up here, it's nice, but I thought adding that, like adding, a little bit more impact to it. So I added this like clap with a lot of reverb on it to add a little bit more impact to it. So that was something that I added to that. And make sure I have all my effects on here before I start and I have a little bit of like auto pan for all of these like random effects down here. So it sounds like it's moving around. Okay, so all together with the sounds from the beginning, I'm pretty sure if I turned everything on, it sounds like this. The fire is a little bit loud because I turned it back up, but you get the idea of just adding these different, layers together for the different parts of the effect, essentially. So yeah. I have one last thing that I was going to show real quick. And I wanted to show that you can really make these sound effects with, more than just, the sounds that you look for. Like you can really work at you can really use kind of like very low, not what you're looking for sounds to essentially, let me open up something else quick. You can use really whatever you want, the point I'm getting at, to make whatever sounds that you want. So what I'm going to show you, is something real quick. Let me pull up the original files. So I did a contest where I was given very specific sound files, and I was only allowed to use these sound files right here. And I had to create, and I'll show you the video of what I had to make with, but I had to take these 3 sound files and pull all of the sounds that I wanted to make, manipulate them however I wanted to with just these files. And these are essentially just creaking and squeaking chairs. I start from the beginning. And then we have these just moving chairs around. So from those sound files, I was able to make a sound to this video, which will show you right now. Let me start from back here. So in and of itself, it's just a very simple sound, but I have a lot of different layers going on to what this is. So the very first thing that I've got going on here is this file right here. On it, I have a bunch of different effects to get the effect that I wanted, but the original sound itself sounds like this. Well, let me solo it. It's just the squeak of a chair. So maybe one sec. So it's just the squeak of this chair. And what I did is I added some distortion to it to give it that kind of ringing quality to it, some reverb, a little bit of saturator to warm it up, and a little bit of the disharmonics here to make it ring out a little bit more. So that's like the sound, like the move initiate sound. Next, end of the sound here is like he warps from one place to another. So the way I interpreted this is like, space and time are essentially being warped, and that would have like a low end rumble. So I took, this kind of low impact. I took this sound and pitched it down 4 octaves to get this really low end sound, and then added some EQ and a little bit of a saturator to warm it up to give it more of the higher frequencies, and to using the EQ to boost the lower frequencies to get this low end kind of whoosh. So next I have like this like little twinkling sound going throughout the entire thing here. And this is what the original file sounds like. So I'm going to turn off all the effects that I have on it. So it's that sound. Added a little bit of essentially like a frequency shifter to make it flutter a little bit. And then added a little bit of a phaser or a flanger kind of sound to make it kind of flow in one direction. So that just kind of adds like a little bit of a squeaky texture on top of it all. Next is this. So this, let's see if I can move this. So this is what the original file will sound like without, so I added distortion. So this is what the original file sounds like, I think, except I didn't solo it. So it was just a random kind of like background noise that I boosted up, put some distortion on it. So this is kind of also another, like when you're ripping through space, just kind of has like kind of digital ripping texture to it that I thought was really interesting. Next, we have these little things right here, which by themselves, again, sounds like this. And what this was, and you can see that I'm layering them together and then crossfaded them together so that it was a little bit longer. What this is just kind of background noise that was in the original file, and then I just added a phaser onto it to make it sound like it's swirling. And that's how I got the little swirling sound effect there. Next is this file. So turning off the effects again, you get this. Nothing really that interesting in and of itself, but it is pitched down significantly by 32 semitones. But what I wanted to do is kind of have this be like a general pad. So what I did is I added a little bit of like a little chordal structure to it. So it has a little bit of kind of like that aura in the background right here, kind of gives some sound to that. Next, we have the little light that's coming down right here. So that little hue, that little light that kind of has been hanging out there for a while and then shoots down. I got that from pitch shifting it. I can't show it because I don't remember how to pull it up, but essentially pitch shifting the frequency from high to low really quickly. And you can see that right here with the transpose pitch thing. So just quickly pitching it down to give it that quality to it. I don't think there was any other effects on that, no. One thing that I noticed about the original file was these little things that go around the circle, they light up one at a time. So you'll notice they light up one at a time. And I thought maybe to give it some kind of like musical quality to it, I would make it into like a chord structures. So I have 4 of these, chair squeak sounds with just a little bit of reverb on them, and I pitched them all individually from each other. so that I could get, this chord sound. And I figured I could make either like a major or a minor chord out of it with the root, third, fifth, and the octave. So I tried out a major chord, and this is what the major chord sounded like with just these little plucks here. And it's a really nice effect with the lights here, but I just felt like a major triad with the octave didn't sound right, so I made it a minor third. I just felt that that fit a little bit more to what was going on here. Next is just another little pad that I added to add effect to it. And then on the end here is just the same effects that I had here from the beginning for just the ending. So just layering a couple of the effects over with this, low impact, uh, thing that goes backwards, and just reversed it here to make it more of a low impact of him coming back in. So altogether, the entire sound sounds like this. And all of that came from, and it's not the best in the world, mind you, but when I was given, some chair squeaks and some chair creaks, and this is what you can get out of, not having too much to work with, essentially. So yeah, does anybody have any questions real quick? I mean, I was planning on maybe having this last a little bit longer, but I kind of, flew through the stuff with sampling. There's not really too much I had to talk about with sampling because, it's just, how to manipulate the samples and layer them together to get the effects that you wanted. And I showed you a couple different ways of doing that and a couple different demonstrations of that essentially. I hope the quality of this has been okay and that you were able to learn something from it. So yeah, does anybody have any questions? The three of you that are here.
Not really.
No? I mean,
It
I
sounds.
wanted to show more and I could go more in depth with it, but I mean, it's pretty straightforward, just knowing the different techniques that you can use with using samples. Um, so yeah, uh, I was expecting this to take a little bit longer, but an hour is an hour, so I can say that that was a course in some way. Um, so for the next couple weeks, I'm going to be getting into probably what everyone's probably most interested, which is synthesis. So next week, I'm going to talk about the essential basics of synthesis. We're going to start from a very low level of like the theory of how synthesis works and maybe like the basic layout of a synthesizer. What are the different parts? What do they do? And then from there on, we'll get into more specific forms of synthesis, such as additive, subtractive. We'll spend a whole week on, frequency modulation synthesis or FM synthesis, and then get into some different types of more complex, more niche ones. Probably get into modular stuff, and then the last week will be implementation. So hope that this has been somewhat educational for you. Thank you for coming out in your very busy schedules. I know you guys have so many places to go, so many things to do. Uh, but thanks for coming out. If you have any questions, just message me. Let me know. And if you want to know more about like any of the things that I showed you, I'll let you know about that. So yeah, same time next week, 3 o'clock on Friday. We'll start into like the basics of synthesis. And yeah, I'll see you guys around then.